The theme is the style that runs through all of your slides. Even though slides are in sort of a different arrangement, they all have a very common color and a set of fonts that is consistent from slide to slide. To change your theme, you have a couple of different options. One way would be to just click the theme button and you just get a bunch of different options. And you click on these over here and it will change the theme so that all of the elements are now different, but they're sort of unified with each other. So you have that option. Another way you can change your theme is to just change each slide one at a time. This actually isn't really the correct way of doing it, but if you don't really want to mess around with sort of the more challenging way of doing it, this is probably the easier way, even though it might take more time. So I'll show you how to do that. Let's say I don't really like these fonts and I want them to be something different. Now, when you're choosing fonts, I'm just going to sort of group them into two big groups. There are fancy fonts that are fun but hard to read, and there are more basic fonts that are easy to read. So a good rule to follow is that you do not want to choose fancy fonts when you have a lot of text. So for example, on a slide like this, if I'm going to be writing a lot of information, I don't want to make this all fancy. I might be able to make this title a little bit more fancy though. So when you're deciding how to change your fonts for your whole presentation, you really only want to stick to maybe two fonts, maybe one that's a little bit more fancy and one that's a little bit more basic. So for this one here, I am going to choose my basic font for the main title. I'm going to choose Montserrat. And I'm going to put my fancy font down here. I'm going to choose this one here, Sacramento. When you're choosing fonts, if you don't have anything in here that you really like, you can always go to more fonts and choose something else from this menu. There's hundreds of them in here, and you can look at them by what type of font they are. And if you see something you like, all you do is just click on it and click OK, and then that adds it to your list of fonts. I'm going to go back to that one though. Okay, so I've basically chosen two fonts, Montserrat and Sacramento. So when I go through the rest of my presentation, I'm going to change the rest of my presentation to match those two. So this will be my more plain font, and then I could probably use my fancy font up here. Now, you're going to need to check with your instructor about their guidelines for these because they may not want you to use fancy fonts at all or only very, very sparingly. But notice as I'm doing this, the rest of the presentation still looks like it used to. So I would have to go through each slide and change those elements. A quicker way of doing this would be to change the master slide. So if you go to slide and then edit master, this is basically the guidelines for the whole theme. And if you get back here and change it, then it's going to affect even new slides that you create. So I'm just going to go to this master right here. And I'm going to just change this to Sacramento, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Now notice when I did that, if you can see in here, all of these change, all these different layouts, they change to that type of font. Then if I go into all of these others, these are all right now set for Arial. If I put my cursor in here and then hit Control A, which is to select all of them, and change all of the Arial to Montserrat instead, what that'll do, I don't know if you can see that, but it changes it in all of the other slides. So I'm going to exit here. And now if I go through my slides, they have all changed so that they have Montserrat and Sacramento. And if I add a new slide, if I go right in here and add a new slide with the layout, like this one here, section header, see it's written in that fancy font now. This is one way to set up all of your slides with a different theme without having to go through all of them and change them. And the nice thing is that maybe I work on this for a while and I realize, this fancy font is just, it's too much. What I can do is go back into the master and I can change just that font to something else. Maybe this one. Changes here. And when I exit out, all of my slides now, not this one, I think it's because I changed these two. I'll come back and fix those in a minute. But all of these other slides now have their new title that has been changed to this font. So you can change all of them at once. The reason these two didn't change, I think it's because I physically changed them myself. I'm going to select all, Control A to select all. And I'm going to click this, which is clear formatting. That takes away the stuff that I did to it on my own, and it puts in what the master slide is telling it to do. And I believe the same thing will happen here. If I click on these two, I'm holding down the shift key this time to click on both text boxes. I'm going to click clear formatting, and then it goes back to what it says to do on the master slide. So those are some ways that you can change the theme. One other thing that you can also change, and I'll go to the master slide again to do this, is the background. So on here on the master slide, I can click background and I can change the background color. Maybe I don't want it to be black. Maybe I want it to be more gray, for example. So if I click done, notice that all of the slides now have this gray background, except for this one right here. I might have to go in and change that color because that's a shape. So these are just some things that you can do to edit the theme and add your own special touches to it.